Being a Resident Evil fan hasn't been easy these past few months. The Resident Evil 3 remake has been released on April 3rd, and the game had also been leaked in France a few weeks earlier. And let's just say that the reception for this game has been really extreme. On one end, you have people that absolutely loved this game, and then you have people that absolutely detest it. It seems that there is no middle ground with this game. You either despise it or you love it. In fact, it's kinda annoying to talk about this game on the internet. Every time that you try to talk about this game on the internet, someone will inevitably come and tell you, "Why are you enjoying this piece of shit game? You are not allowed to like this. Oh my fucking god, this remake is trash. Oh my fucking god!" And trust me, as someone that really enjoyed this game, that gets old really fast. So, why has this game's reception been so mixed? Let's find out. Welcome to the definitive Resident Evil 3 Remake review. In this review I will analyze the entire game and try to see why fans are so mixed on this game. So, the first thing that you can notice when you boot up the game is the new Nemesis design, proudly facing you in the title screen. Nemesis in the original game looked more like a Frankenstein monster, with his stapled face and a huge black coat. In this remake, Nemesis' face now looks like a distorted Mr. X, with a broken nose and exposed teeth. Also, instead of wearing a coat, his body is now wrapped in body bags. Personally, I love this design. It looks less cartoony and fits the more realistic tone of the remake's timeline. Also, the fact that you can actually tell that he was a normal tyrant before being injected with the parasite is very cool. Let's be honest here, in the original game, Nemesis really did not look like a tyrant at all. So, this new design is very different to the original game. Keyword here is different. If there was a word that could describe the remake, different would be very appropriate, because this game is nothing like the original. It's completely different compared to the original. In fact, I'd say that this is a complete reimagining of the game. It's really not as faithful as the Resident Evil 2 remake was. If I had to describe this game, it would be, what if Resident Evil 3 had a son with Resident Evil 4? The remake honestly feels like a mix between Resident Evil 3 and Resident Evil 4. The level design in the remake is much more similar to Resident Evil 4 level design. It's much more linear, and backtracking is well, there is some backtracking, but it's much less compared to the original game. The game honestly focuses more on action compared to the original, which still used the tank controls and the fixed camera angle. Resident Evil 2 Remake was also a reimagining, but at least the police station in the remake had a similar design to the original game, before dropping you to the sewers and the laboratory, which had completely new level design. In Resident Evil 3 Remake, I don't think there are any areas that look like the original game. Everything is completely new. At most, you get some nods and references to the original game, but for the most part, level design is completely new. You don't explore the same areas from the original game, and yeah, it's mostly new stuff that you see in this remake. Speaking of nods to the original game, the start of the game is Jill's apartment. If you remember, in the original game, you could see a bit of Jill's apartment during the opening. And the very start of the game showed Jill literally exploding out of it. Well, in the remake, Jill's apartment is actually a playable area, which is very appreciated. The opening in the original game always felt kinda random, like, why did Jill's apartment explode? The game opens with a beautiful opening, reminding us of the Resident Evil 1 glory days, using live action actors to show us the explosion of the pandemic in Raccoon City. We also get some really creepy ads by Umbrella, and even cooler, we get to see Nemesis actually being made, which is fucking awesome. I always wanted to see this in the original game. I absolutely love this opening. It's completely different to the original opening, which showed us the UBCS soldiers' downfall, but it still works great at setting the tone. It's kind of a shame though that we didn't get a remade opening from the original game. Then, when the game actually starts, you are in first person. Hold on, I think I might have inserted my Resident Evil 7 disc instead of Resident Evil 3. Nope, this is Resident Evil 3. In a cool twist, we start the game in first person, so we can take a closer look at Jill's apartment. It's also a nice nod to Resident Evil 7. And let me tell you, they really nailed the atmosphere during this part. The atmosphere is incredible. The sound of the rain coming from the window, the static of the TV. This part is legitimately creepy. One cool Easter egg is that you can actually see Nemesis' silhouette during a few frames on the TV. Anyway, you make your way to the bathroom, and then you find out that this is not the real world, this is a nightmare. It seems Jill has got a bad case of PTSD from the Arklay Mansion incident. This part is really cool and foreshadows Jill's infection very well. Jill is fucking amazing in this game. She's not only badass, but also shows vulnerability thanks to great scenes like these. After the disturbing scene in the bathroom, we wake up in the real world. You can hear police sirens in the background. You know something is wrong down there. It seems that Jill has been stuck in her house for a long time. Apparently, Jill got put under house arrest by Chief Irons. If you read the files in the apartment, it's clear why. Jill has been investigating Umbrella on her own, trying to find anything that she can use against them. Most of the evidence got blown up with the mansion in Resident Evil 1, unfortunately. This area is so cool and has got some amazing things you can inspect. There are even photos of Annette Birkin from the Resident Evil 2 remake on the wall. Honestly, this opening is very strong and I love it very much. After you go inside the bathroom again, you will see Jill reassuring herself that this is not another nightmare, it's the real world. And after this realization has set in, we finally switch back to third person. After receiving a phone call from Brad, we finally are introduced to the big boy Nemesis. Yeah, in this game, Nemesis is introduced much earlier compared to the original game. This starts the first real gameplay segment of the game, a scripted Nemesis chase through the building. A lot of people don't like the fact that he shows up so early. Personally, I'm indifferent to it, doesn't ruin the game for me, and some of the scripted sequences are absolutely badass and a joy to watch on the first playthrough. They also can be skipped very quickly on subsequent playthroughs. But I understand the complaints. Hold forward to win is just a glorified cutscene, it's not real gameplay. Still, the whole sequence is so cool that it doesn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. By the way, this is when a really weird change happens. For some reason, Jill loses her samurai edge during the apartment chase, and later finds a normal Glock to use as her main gun through the rest of the game. I don't know why they did this. It's really weird, considering the original game had no problems with using the samurai edge. The only thing I can think of is that in the remake, the same upgrade system from Resident Evil 2 Remake is in, and maybe the samurai edge can't be upgraded with extended magazines and laser sights? I don't know. By the way, a lot of people for some reason are really angry with this scene. I honestly don't know why people are so harsh on this game. Like, a lot of complaints about this game are really nitpicky like this. People fail to realize that many of the shortcomings of the remake were also part of the original. Maybe it's just nostalgia. This game is so different compared to the original that anyone that wanted a more faithful remake is bound to hate this game by default. That's a damn shame, because this game is not that bad, it's just different. Eventually, you exit the building and Nemesis is crushed by the ceiling. Jill is free from the monster for now, and now we start the uptown area. This is really cool, and also is a good explanation for why the apartment exploded in the original game. The issue now is that the uptown area was completely different in the original game. In the original game, the uptown area was a linear explorable area with a few puzzles until you reached the RPD. But in the remake, the uptown map is pretty much a glorified cinematic. It's basically a straight line until you reach the ending of this section. And it's a damn shame. This area is fucking cool as shit. There are a lot of cool cinematic moments, and it looks extremely beautiful, but in the original game, this area was explorable, and it's really disappointing. It would have been really cool if we could have returned to Uptown and explore it freely later in the game. Maybe we could have even gone back to Dario's warehouse and see him die, just like in the original game. Yeah, that's a missed opportunity right there. Well, at least what they did with Brad is pretty awesome. You meet with Brad in Uptown, and together with him you take refuge in the bar from an horde of zombies. During this cutscene, Brad gets bitten by a zombie, so he decides basically to sacrifice himself for you and allows you to escape. This is an amazing moment of redemption for his character, and I very much enjoy it. Again, this is another really nitpicky complaint, but a lot of people are angry that Nemesis does not kill Brad in this remake. And actually there's an explanation for it in the remake. Later in the game you can find a file that says that Nemesis can basically recognize people that are infected. Since Brad gets infected at the very start of the game, Nemesis stops pursuing him early and focuses on Jill instead. Well, people hated this change. They say that this makes Nemesis a complete failure, since he didn't manage to kill even one STARS member. And to that I say, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? Guys, we need to talk. Nemesis' intro in the original was really cool, on that I agree. But Nemesis was not scary because he killed Brad. He was scary because he was imposing and fast, while the player was stuck with slow and clunky tank controls. By the way, Brad was also bitten in the original game as well. He was already infected, he would have died regardless of what Nemesis did. And let's not mention the fact that Brad is probably the weakest Stars member. Yeah, he's so weak and pathetic that he's basically a free kill for Nemesis. Killing him is not an accomplishment for Nemesis. So, overall, I'd say that Brad is good in the remake. I wish I could say the same for Dario. In the remake, he's just an asshole that you encounter for a few seconds and that's it, really. In the original game, he was an asshole because he lost his family, but I guess that in the remake universe, Kendo stole that thing from him. Like I said before, this could have been fixed if they allowed us to go back to Dario's warehouse later in the game, but since they didn't do that, yeah, Dario is probably the worst character in the remake. This game really needed more time spent exploring, and a return to Uptown could have done the trick. After you make your way to the parking lot, you witness the chopper crashing scene from the original game, except much earlier. In the original it took place during the clock tower. Nemesis is then defeated with a quick time event and you are saved by Carlos. You can ask anyone, even people that hate this game, they will all say the same thing. Carlos is a complete improvement over the original. His new design is amazing, he has much more screen time now, and is also more entertaining compared to his original counterpart. I also enjoyed his original version, but the remake version is much more improved. The relationship between Carlos and Jill is also much more interesting now. In the original game, Jill didn't trust Carlos for a total of 5 seconds. Then after Carlos says this,
"Look, we're just mercenaries, hired hands. Do you really think the master would tell his dogs why they have to retrieve the stick he just threw?"
Jill's trust issues are literally never brought up again. In the remake, Carlos actually has to earn Jill's trust by saving her a bunch of times, and you can really feel their connection growing throughout the game. You are also introduced to Mikhail here, and in this version I'd say he's actually better. He spends less of his screen time being unconscious at least. The downtown area starts now, and this is when the game truly begins. This is probably the best area in the game. I guess this is why they featured this area in the demo, because it's literally the best area in the entire game. This area is really open, there's lots of exploration, items to find, backtracking. It's classic Resident Evil, alright, although much smaller in scope and condensed. There are many interiors and shops that you can explore. There are even callbacks to the original game, like the pharmacy, the garage and the power plant. There are also some new places to see, like the subway, the toy shop, the donut shop and the supermarket. And there are a lot of cool references to other Capcom games, like Mega Man, Ghosts and Goblins. Honestly, this area is fucking awesome. This is also when the game introduces the new dodge mechanic to the game. And let me tell you, holy shit, it's so much better compared to the original game. In the original game, I learned to play without relying on the dodge, simply because it was very clunky to use, and sometimes it straight up failed. It was very unreliable and unresponsive. The dodge in the remake instead is fucking amazing. It's really easy to do, but not so easy that it completely breaks the game. It's a nice balance between player skill and accessibility. The dodge also replaces the defense items from Resident Evil 2 Remake. Having both of them would be definitely overkill, since you would pretty much never take damage with both of them. Speaking of the knife, now that it's no longer a defense item, it's no longer got a durability bar, which is very nice. Jill also has got a unique stabbing animation for the knife, which I was told is a reference to Resident Evil 5. I guess. I didn't play Resident Evil 5 very much. Unfortunately, zombie physics were nerfed hard in this game. After a zombie dies in Resident Evil 3 Remake, it won't move and cannot be interacted with. Also, when exploding limbs with your gun, the body parts will disappear instead of lingering on the ground. I guess this was done for performance reasons. I don't think this is that much of a big deal, but it's still an unfortunate downgrade compared to Resident Evil 2 Remake. Maybe it will be fixed in the inevitable PS5 remastered version or something. Once you turn off the fire, you meet Nikolai for the first time. Compared to the original game, Nikolai is much more cartoonishly evil. In the original game, Nikolai was more cold, calculating and professional. In the remake, it seems like they turned Nikolai into Salazar. He enjoys being evil so much and is really cheesy. A lot of people say that Nikolai was better in the original game, but honestly, I kinda like the remake version more. In the original game, yes, he was more serious and professional, but he was also really boring. At least the remake Nikolai is really entertaining to watch. After that cutscene ends, you are treated to music. Holy shit! Yes, this remake has actually got music. In the Resident Evil 2 remake, most of the music was replaced with generic creepy ambience. And it made the game really scary, but was also much less memorable compared to the original music. After you exit the garage, you can see a power generator. Shooting this will stun enemies, and the two dogs that have been placed here are basically a tutorial for this mechanic. This is a returning mechanic from the original game. In the original game you could shoot barrels and C4 and other interactable items to basically damage enemies, and yeah, in this remake it's pretty much the same, except there are only barrels and generators. The next section is the power station, which again is completely different. In the remake you have to explore basically a maze of corridors and activate 4 switches, while being hunted by drain demos. In the original game, drain demos were basically a reskin of leakers from Resident Evil 2. Yeah, they had a couple of different animations, but let's not kid ourselves. They were basically a palette swap or a reskin of leakers. In the remake, they look pretty much the same as they did in the original. However, they are much smaller and they behave more like small spiders. They also have very low health and can be killed easily with a few handgun rounds. The real problem is that they are very quick and they hunt you in swarms of 2 or 3. They are very dangerous because they can inflict the parasite status effects on you, and the parasite status effect is basically the same as the poison from Resident Evil 2, except it's even worse, because it slows you down even more, fucks up your aim, and makes the screen very hard to see. This makes this area really fun to go through because you need to be really quick. You can't afford to stop even 1 second. The drain demos are really hard to dodge, and you can't afford to be hit, because if you get hit by the parasite status effect, you are basically fucked. Healing the parasite status effect is pretty easy. You just need to use any healing item that contains a green herb, but especially on harder difficulties, if you get hit with the parasite status effect, you will be so slow that you will probably die. So it's really dangerous. This area is really cool, I like it. But again, just like the other parts of the game, this area is really best on harder difficulties. This area is probably really boring on easy mode. Now, you might ask yourself, why did they replace the poison status effect with the parasite status effect, since they are so similar? And I think I have an answer to that. In Resident Evil 2 Remake, blue herbs had an additional effect of increasing your defense when used together with a red herb. This effect was really powerful, so they probably didn't want you to use this effect with the dodge. So what they did is remove blue herbs and basically replace the poison status effect with the parasite status effect, which can be cured with just green herbs. This part honestly is really fun, especially when doing a speedrun, but it's kinda underwhelming also. I think it would have been much better if the maze that you are in was a bit longer and also more complicated, because it's really easy once you look at the map. Actually, it would have been really great if they disabled the map for this area. Would have made things even more intense. Also, one more disappointing thing is that Drain Demos never show up after this part of the game. It would have been really awesome if they showed up at the clock tower or maybe the laboratory at the end. There's even a concept art that you can unlock in the game that shows a Drain Demos nest in the labs at the end of the game. I guess that didn't make the cut, unfortunately. And again, the fact that they never show up again makes their inclusion feel less natural and more scripted. This is somewhat of a problem in this game. The city in this game is beautiful and it's really atmospheric, but it feels a bit less alive compared to the original game, because in the original game there were a lot of different enemies that could appear thanks to the random number generator. So yeah, this game feels much less dynamic and more scripted. Well, after you finish the power station, you just need to go to the subway company and select a route for the train. And when I played this section, I was like, wait, that's it? I'm already done with the city? And this is because in the original, the trolley needed like 3 or 4 pieces to be completed. And yeah, that was really disappointing to me, that you need to only do 2 things to repair the train. Well, fortunately, you are not really done with the city. It's just something to trick you into thinking that. So, after you finish the power station, Nemesis' first encounter will begin, and let me tell you, this encounter is a goddamn masterpiece. They really nailed him here. This encounter is the only encounter in the game that feels really natural, not scripted, and it's really organic, just like Mr. X from Resident Evil 2. I'm not kidding, Nemesis really feels threatening during this encounter, and here is how his AI works. If you try to run away from him, he will start to sprint, and the speed of this sprint depends on your chosen difficulty. If you play on standard or lower difficulty, this sprint will be barely faster than his walk, but if you play on hardcore or higher, this sprint will allow him to reach you in like 2 seconds. It's absolutely insane how fast he is in Nightmare in Inferno mode. It gives him pure tension and adrenaline, a different kind of fear compared to the dread of Mr. X. You are supposed to use sound cues or turn the camera around your back to time your dodge, and sometimes Nemi will also jump in front of you, blocking your path and trying to punch you. If Nemesis lands a punch, you will be stunned, and you can mash buttons to get back on your feet faster, but if you are stun locked, you are basically dead. Nemesis can also grab you with his tentacle to slow you down, and if Nemesis grabs you, sometimes he can do an instant kill with some really cool animations, like for example, one animation as him killing you by making you eat his tentacle, like how he killed Brad in the original game, and another cool animation is him throwing Jill on the ground and crushing her head with his feet. It's really rare though, I didn't really see very much. Nemesis has got 2 weak points, his head and the device housing his heart on his chest. And one cool detail is that if you shoot that device too much, Nemesis will start protecting it with his hand. If you manage to down Nemesis, he will drop some supplies, just like in the original game. His first supply box contains an extended magazine for your handgun, And the second supply box appears after he starts creating parasite zombies. It contains a suppressor for your handgun. However, just like Mr. X, Nemesis won't stay down for very long. By the way, Nemesis can actually follow you inside one of the save rooms during this section. I won't spoil which one it is though, and it doesn't happen very often, it's actually a bit rare. And if you lose Nemesis, or enter a building without multiple exits, Nemesis will despawn by climbing a building with his tentacle. He will then spawn again in preset locations with a cool animation of him dropping down, sliding down a wall or opening a door. I have to be honest, this section is the highlight of the game. It's probably the best part of the game. I love it really so much, it's absolutely amazing. Oh man. The problem is that this is the only time that this happens in the entire game. Nemesis really feels like Mr. X did during this section. He feels organic and not scripted. To be fair, Mr. X was also free roaming for only a short part of the game, but the problem is that during Mr. X section you were doing a lot of backtracking and exploring, so it felt much longer compared to Nemesis. Since the game is more linear here, this Nemesis section can take you like 5 minutes to complete. Even if you don't backtrack earlier and grab all the items with the lockpick and cutting tool, at most this section will take 20 minutes. I mean, it's just too short. This section is so fucking awesome, I wanted more of this. They really needed to add at least 2 more sections with free roaming Nemesis. Maybe Uptown and the Clock Tower? Wink wink. After you complete an easy puzzle, you will be introduced to parasite zombies. These guys are created by Nemesis by infecting zombies with the Ni Alpha parasite. This is really cool, and it's basically a callback to Resident Evil 4. There's a reason for that. Apparently the developers want to connect Resident Evil 4 better to the main storyline, so I guess you can look forward to that in Resident Evil 4 Remake. The parasite heads have a really long range, and dodging them is actually kinda hard. It's better, in my opinion, if you listen to the sound that they make, and if you dodge just right when you hear that sound, usually you will be fine. One thing that I hear often is that people are angry that Nemesis can be downed with just one grenade, and I don't think it's a big deal, because I realized that the developers wanted the grenades to be your oh shit button, and the grenades are basically used to reset the fight if you are in trouble, and this doesn't work in Inferno and Nightmare mode anyway, so who cares. Anyway, after you return to the subway, Nemesis' second encounter will start, and I'm not going to lie, it's kinda boring. The problem is that the generators and barrels make this part way too easy. Personally, I would have removed them and made this section twice as long. That way you would have had to actually fight Nemesis to get through this part. Also, Nemesis can't run while he's indoors, so this makes this encounter even more boring. And Nemesis actually drops shotgun shells during this encounter, and that's because Nemesis from this point on will stop dropping weapon parts, and that is really disappointing. This is so fucking stupid. At least make him drop the custom shotgun from the original game or something. Oh, come on. Anyway, after you exit this grate, you will enter the sewers. I kinda understand why reviewers are angry though. Like, after Resident Evil 2 Remake, Did we really need another sewer level? I'd rather have had another city section, or the clock tower, or anything else really. But at least the sewers in this game are really enjoyable. I actually like the sewers in this game more than Resident Evil 2 Remake. The sewers in Resident Evil 2 Remake were cool, but also kind of a chore on repeated playthroughs. The sewer section in Resident Evil 3 Remake is just a linear corridor with two paths to explore. One path leads to the grenade launcher and the other leads to the battery pack used to progress basically. The main enemy that is in the sewers is the Hunter Gamma, and the new redesign that they got is fucking awesome. They kinda look like a mix between Toads and the Gravedigger from the original game. The only attack that they have is walking towards you and try to hit you. Shooting them in the mouth deals double damage, and if you use a fire weapon, you deal even more damage. They are really cool, but the only problem I have with them is that they are really too easy to kill. If you use a flame round, you will kill them in one hit on any difficulty. One really cool thing about Gamma Hunters is that they can't go through doors, but they can still open the door with their mouth, and that is an insane jump scare the first time you play the game. After you make it out of the sewers, a jump scare will begin the next Nemesis encounter. A lot of people say, why does Nemesis grab her head and not just crush it? And to that I say, probably the same reason why he didn't just strangle Jill every time he grabbed her in the original. The fact that Nemesis gets a flamethrower in addition to his rocket launcher in this game is fucking cool. There were also concept art that showed that they also considered giving Nemesis a Gatling gun, which would have been even more fun. Unfortunately, the next section is actually not that good. Just like the sewers and the second encounter, this part is really cool, but could have been much better. It would have been much more fun if Nemesis was faster and you had to run like hell to outrun his flame. But in the game, even on Inferno mode, is so slow that there is no tension during the climb to the top of the building, and it basically turns into a boring Uncharted set piece. At least it looks cool, but talk about wasted potential here. The climb to the top might be underwhelming, but the boss fight is actually incredibly good. Flamethrower Nemesis is the first boss fight in the game, and it's super fun. The addition of the dodge really makes Resident Evil 3 bosses much more fun to fight compared to Resident Evil 2 bosses. The first phase of the fight is to destroy the fuel tank, and you can make use of cover and also keep your distance while shooting the fuel tank, and somehow if you shoot Nemesis hard, you will also damage the fuel tank. One nice detail is that in this boss fight, Nemesis can dodge grenade rounds just like he did in the original game. After you destroy the fuel tank, Nemesis will gain a speed boost and he will start to charge at you really fast, particularly in Inferno mode. In Inferno mode, you have like 1 second to dodge his charge attack. It's so fucking fast, honestly. After you defeat Nemesis, Jill somehow manages to fall down the building without dying. I'm not going to lie, some of the cutscenes in this game are kinda dumb. I think they are preparing themselves for Resident Evil 4 Remake. The next part of the game is a recycled street from Resident Evil 2 Remake, and I actually don't mind. It's really cool to see this place from another perspective, and also without rain. You can also take a look at the parking garage of the RPD here, and you know what would have been really cool? It would have been really awesome if Jill could have entered the RPD from the garage, so she could have had her own RPD section. Anyway, you can actually meet Kendo in Resident Evil 3 Remake. In the original RE3, he was only mentioned in some files. His encounter foreshadows Resident Evil 2 Remake really well, and it's cool to see him interact with Jill. Still, This whole encounter is so short, I don't even know why they bothered, honestly. One really cool thing they did before the game launched is that they patched Resident Evil 2 Remake and added a letter by Jill in Kendo's gun shop, and that was really cool because it means that Jill actually stopped here in universe and wrote a letter for Kendo. This next part is absolutely great. First of all, this is literally the best cutscene in the entire series. Nemesis throws the broken flamethrower at Jill, literally unboxes a rocket launcher and starts to fire at Jill. I have no idea where he got that rocket launcher, I guess it was shipped with him, but still, holy shit, it's so cool. However, once again, it feels like I played a different game compared to the internet. People on the internet say that this part sucks because Nemesis is scripted. And what the fuck are you talking about? Again, it's not scripted. You are just in a linear path, but the rocket launcher Nemesis is a fully functioning creature with its own moveset and AI. You can even try to fight him, and you will notice that he has a different moveset compared to standard Nemesis. In fact, if you look in the game files, Nemesis and the rocket launcher Nemesis are different creatures. Nemesis can still sprint and punch, but he can also instant kill you if you get too close, with a cool point-blank rocket animation, and he can shoot you from afar with rockets that deal massive damage. He's so strong that I actually don't recommend fighting him, since he only drops flame rounds anyway. This part is really hard, honestly. You have to dodge zombies while worrying about rockets, and Nemesis can kill you super quickly, in harder difficulties at least. I guess if you play on standard mode or lower, this is going to be really boring. I think many of the people who said that this game is bad played on standard or lower difficulty. This game is much more combat focused compared to Resident Evil 2 Remake, so if you play in a difficulty where the combat is really stupid easy, your experience is going to suffer greatly. Unfortunately, the gas station from the original game was made into a cutscene, but I actually don't mind, because in Resident Evil 2 Remake we got a different gas station to explore, so I guess it would have been kinda redundant. Now, this chase with rocket launcher Nemesis was dope as fuck, but one of the main complaints of this remake is about to show its head. After this part, not only you will never see a city street again, but Nemesis will stop chasing you and is now just a boss fight. This sucks so much, and really disappointed me on my first playthrough. Nemesis boss fights are fucking awesome in this game, but still, Nemesis stops stalking you way too early in this game. In the original game, he only stopped stalking you after Jill got cured from the virus. That's why they should have given us more city streets or an RPD section for Jill, so we could have gotten one more big Nemesis non-scripted sequence. The city also felt much bigger in the original game, because it was freely explorable and you did a lot of backtracking. The amount of city that we got in the remake is not that bad, but since it's more linear and there's less backtracking, it feels like the city section lasts much less. You can't even explore the streets out of the hospital, for fuck's sake. This is the biggest flaw of this game, unfortunately, but I got used to it. This next cutscene just shows how great the story in this game is. You can tell what everyone is thinking just by looking at their facial expressions. Honestly, this cutscene is great. Top-notch stuff right here. We see Mikhail is starting to realize that Nikolai might be the traitor that basically wiped his unit. Unfortunately, before Mikhail can say anything else, Nemesis shows up again and kills every survivor on the train. You know, The survivor's death could have been much more powerful if Jill actually saved them herself. As it is, sometimes I even forget they exist.
Get off my train, shitbird!
I fucking love my Kyle in this game. Oh my fucking god. It's time for the RPD section of the remake, while playing as Carlos. And if I have to be honest, this is probably the worst part of the game for me. It's not bad. Carlos has got a bunch of cool one-liners, there are many Easter eggs.
Now here's a weird fucking door.
Leave it! We're here for Bard!
Yeah. Welcome, Leon. Bet you had a kick-ass first day.
There's a lot of cool stuff in this section of the game, and yet I still don't like it very much. Why? Well, just like in the original game, this part feels like complete filler. Carlos accomplishes almost nothing during this section. All you do is reach the Star's office, and then you discover that Dr. Bard is not in the RPD, is in the hospital. Gameplay-wise, this part is also really boring. All you do is shoot horde of zombies with the assault rifle and a few leakers. In the original game, this part was also filler, but at least in that game you still played as Jill, and you could see the RPD from her point of view. And also there was a fucking amazing Nemesis encounter at the end. Since you play as Carlos in the remake, Nemesis is nowhere to be seen. There is still some cool stuff during this section. For example, you can see how the two officers are killed by the leaker in the west hallway. You can also see what destroyed the shower room wall, although the answer is kinda boring. And finally, you can actually fight leakers in the Resident Evil 3 remake, which is kinda cool, I guess. I guess this is why they didn't make the Drain Demos behave like in the original game. It would be kinda pointless to have two creatures that do almost the same thing. The only noteworthy thing that happens here is that we finally learn of Brad's fate. He became a zombie, just like in the original Resident Evil 2, and it was revealed that he was the one to infect Marvin. People really don't like this scene, and they say that Brad having enough humanity left to speak is stupid. But they completely forgot that this shit was in the first game too. For Itchy Tasty Zombie, do you remember? Like I said before, Nemesis killing Brad in the original game is a cool scene, but it's not an accomplishment for Nemesis. Brad is a weakling and he was already infected. So this new death scene that we got for him is actually not that bad. I really enjoy it. This death scene is more emotional in my opinion. We don't know if Brad really said sorry or he was just mimicking Marvin, and this is what makes this scene much more powerful in my opinion. So I don't like this section very much, but if you play on Nightmare mode, this part of the game is much better. In Nightmare and Inferno mode, you can see Brad stalking you from the windows of the west hallway, and later on he will actually appear in the locker room, which is fucking cool as shit. They also replaced some zombies with pale heads and leakers, so this section gameplay wise is also much less boring in Nightmare and Inferno mode, so it's much better. After you are done with the RPD, you resume control of Jill, and in this next save room you find freeze rounds? Nope, these are mine rounds. The mine thrower was removed in this game, and they just added the mine rounds for the grenade launcher instead. This is a great change, especially because the mine thrower was really useless in the original game. Still, it's a shame that they didn't include freeze rounds as well, since they bothered to include explosive rounds again. By the way, if you missed the shotgun and the grenade launcher, the game will spawn them in this save room. A similar thing happened in Resident Evil 2 Remake. If you forgot the shotgun or grenade launcher, they will spawn in the laboratory. After you climb up to the surface, you will find yourself in a park, and this part of the game is the most beautiful. Holy shit, this area is so beautiful, and it's also so peaceful. I really love this area. It's a shame that it's so small. This small area is basically the replacement for the park for the original game, so they might as well made it a little bigger. Come on. This next part is absolutely amazing. Bitch can't even swim is absolutely hilarious and fits right at home with Resident Evil 4 cheesiness. And Nemesis' second form in this game looks absolutely incredible. He looks like a Bloodborne boss. He's so cool looking, he's fucking awesome. This form is basically the final boss from the original Resident Evil 3, except in the original game his face was completely burned by the acid, while in this game it's mostly intact. At first it felt kinda weird to see this form, but after I got used to it, I'd say that it looks really cool. The only problem I have with Doggo Nemesis is that he appears really too early. I would have preferred him to appear later and have a bit more of first form Nemesis. Especially because the whole appeal of Nemesis is that he's a tyrant that retains his intelligence when he transforms. And in this game, while Nemesis is still intelligent in his second form, is also much more savage and brutal, which kinda makes him less appealing. So I would have liked to see first form Nemesis a bit more before we switched to this form. Still, this boss fight is probably the best in the game. Doggo Nemesis is super fast and deadly. He's super fun to fight against, because you are always dodging stuff and moving. The arena where you fight him is also really beautiful. We even have a Resident Evil 1 Easter egg in the arena, a bus stop to the Arklay Mountains. After you deal enough damage, Nemesis will start his second phase. He will start running on top of the rooftops, and even climb on top of the clock tower, trying to jump on top of you. During this part, you must use the mine rounds to make him fall off, and you can stun him by doing this, and expose the parasite. Shoot the parasite for insane damage. You don't have to do this to win, it's recommended, because Nemesis has got a lot of health, and if you don't do this, the fight will take forever. I guess that's why DSP complained about this being a puzzle boss. Of course, it's not much of a puzzle when Jill herself tells you what you need to do. After the boss fight is over, the worst thing about the remake is revealed. In the remake, you can't explore the interior of the clock tower. This is legit my most hated flaw of the remake, and also what most other people hate about the game. The clock tower was a really iconic location, and cutting the interior is an absolute dick move. To this day, I still don't know why Capcom did this. After watching the Resident Evil 8 trailer, I'm even more confused, because they were working on an area from Resident Evil 8 that looks the exact same as the clock tower. They could have just reused the assets from there for the clock tower! I hate everything about this. And it's a damn shame, because if we had 1 extra hour of gameplay inside the clock tower, the game would be almost perfect to me. Maybe with Nemesis first form chasing you inside of the clock tower, that would be great. Also with some puzzles inside. We would have a longer game, satisfying the lol it's so short crowd, and we would have more puzzles, satisfying the lol 2 puzzles in the entire game crowd. And we would also satisfy the lol Nemesis is scripted crowd. This is the only thing that I truly hate in this game. Everything else is great, or at least good to me. I even gave the game a lower score just because of the clock tower. Oh well, at least we got the hospital. The hospital was my favorite part of the original game, and I'm really happy with how it was handled in this game. The hospital is much bigger than the original game, it has a lot of exploration and non-linearity, and the atmosphere is amazing. It's really the only part of the game that's really scary. If only the clock tower was expanded like this. The hunters are also really great. They even reference Resident Evil 1 in their first cutscene. The hunters are now armored and take less damage unless you shoot them in the mouth and destroy the armor. The acid rounds are really good to destroy the armor, and the magnum rounds are really good at just killing them, honestly. The shotgun is also really good. The problem is that Carlos has only got an assault rifle, so while you play as him, you feel quite vulnerable against hunters, and this makes this section the scariest in the game. By the way, I didn't mention this before, but Carlos can't dodge enemies. Instead, he can counter them with a punch. I find this kinda harder to pull off than the dodge, but it's also more satisfying. Hunters still have an instant kill attack. They will roar and cut your throat. This attack is super dangerous, and they can use it even if you have max health. You don't need to be on caution for them to pull this. You need to keep your distance or master the counter to avoid this. Some hunters can even open doors, but only some of them. A good strategy for the room with the two hunters is to bait the first one into following you through the door, then kill him. Since the other one can't open the door, you can really cheese him by entering and exiting the door and shooting him. Really, this part of the game is the best for me. With the downtown area, this is the best level design in the entire game. I even found the shootout at the end of the section to be really fun. I legit don't know why people hate this section so much. Yeah, sure, the zombies exploding after dying is kinda silly, but who cares? Honestly, I'd rather they do that than my PS4 exploding. The shootout reminds me of Resident Evil 4 in a good way. It's very intense in harder difficulties. It's pretty fun, honestly. I mean, it's not a section that I would want to replay over and over again, but it's a nice way to break the pacing. Anyway, after you cure Jill, you can also explore the hospital with her, and it's completely optional, but you can grab all the ammo that Carlos didn't grab, aside from assault rifle ammo. You can open the locks that Carlos couldn't open, and you are also rewarded with the Magnum for your troubles. I really like this optional stuff. I wish we could have done the same with the RPD and maybe Uptown. And if you don't care, you can skip straight to the next area. And the next area is not the Dead Factory. Unlike with the clock tower, I actually don't mind this change. I really like the aesthetic of Nest 2. It's much more colorful than the Resident Evil 2 remake laboratory. And it has got a lot of interesting rooms, like the room with the tyrants and hunters in the pods, and lore-wise, it makes a bit more sense. Nest 2, which is a dumb name, I agree with that, has the same function as the Dead Factory, but at least it's underground, so it's easier to hide from the public. How did Umbrella hide the Dead Factory? It's right in the middle of the city park. It's also implied that Nest 2 and Nest 1 are connected, so transporting the faulty BOWs and the guinea pigs that need to be destroyed from one place to another is much more believable, I think. Anywho, before reaching Nest 2 properly, you have a small warehouse section where you need to find fuses to power up the elevator. This part is pretty fun. It's kinda confusing at first, but once you learn the layout, it's fine. Also, this part was actually made into a map for Resident Evil Resistance. How cool is that? Why can't we get more maps from the single-player games in Resident Evil Resistance? You will have to deal with paleheads in this room. They are enemies that were introduced in the Ghost Survivors DLC for Resident Evil 2 Remake. It's cool that they made them canon. They are basically zombies that regenerate health and are super hard to kill and stun, unless you use really powerful weapons. Usually a magnum headshot or mine rounds will kill them in one hit. They remind me of naked zombies from the original PS1 Resident Evil trilogy, so that is great. Another really fun thing about this area is that you will encounter every enemy type in this area, because there are containers that are used to basically ship BOWs. Once you reach Nest 2 properly, you will find that its layout is very similar to the laboratory of original Resident Evil 2. A linear path where you grab an item and then you backtrack to grab another item. This item is the vaccine for the T virus. The objective here is to grab a sample of the vaccine, which will be used as a bargaining chip against the US government to prevent them from blowing up Raccoon City. The vaccine in the original game was only used to cure Jill, and then it was completely forgotten. You'd think that they would do something more with the solution for all their problems, but no. In the original, the vaccine just feels like a Deus Ex Machina. Carlos finds it randomly in the hospital, uses it to cure Jill, and then no one mentions it ever again. Hello? Mass produce that shit! You can save everyone that is not already a zombie! To be fair, Nikolai blew up the hospital in the original game, but it's still weird that no one mentions it ever again. At least in the remake, Carlos learns about the vaccine from Dr. Bard, and then all the characters decide to try to save the city with the vaccine. Yeah, honestly the story I think is better in the remake. So yeah, congratulations Capcom. In the remake we also get a file that ties Resident Evil 3 Remake with the future Resident Evil 4 Remake, I suppose. So that's kinda neat. After making the vaccine, we get another quick-time event with Doggo Nemesis. I have no idea why they thought hold forward to win is compelling gameplay. This shit should have stopped after the apartment opening. Nikolai also steals the vaccine from Jill. I didn't speak much about Nikolai, but every time he appears is the star of the show. He's so entertaining to watch. Time for the third Nemesis fight, and this one is kinda disappointing. I say kinda because it's still pretty fun. We fight Doggo Nemesis again, except now he has a tentacle he can use for long-range attacks, and also instead of using mine rounds, you have to shoot buttons to electrify him and pour acid on him. This fight is okay. It feels a bit underwhelming because Nemesis' moveset doesn't feel different enough from the last fight. Aside from the tentacle, it's basically the same fight as before. There are also respawning zombies in the arena, but really you can completely ignore them. Most of the time you can set up Nemesis to kill them himself, or just shoot them a few times, they have low health. Only on harder difficulties you must pay attention, because sometimes a pale head will spawn instead of a zombie, and that's kinda nasty. Carlos will also help you find Nemesis. This again is completely useless on lower difficulties because you can just look at him. It's only on harder difficulties that it becomes useful, since you are usually distracted by the pale heads. And finally, we are at the final boss. Instead of fighting inside an arena full of dead tyrants, the aftermath of a fight between the US military and Umbrella, we fight in an arena where Umbrella gathered combat data and set up a rail cannon to destroy rogue BOWs. You use the rail cannon once to begin the fight properly, and then must push 3 generators to recharge the rail cannon while avoiding blob nemesis attacks. You can't push the generators though, because Blob Nemesis will use an instant kill attack. So you have to stun Nemesis by shooting the red pustules around his body. I like this fight, but I think the original fight was a bit better. It was a bit more epic. Still, this fight has got an amazing soundtrack. On lower difficulties this fight is pretty easy. But in higher difficulties, this fight becomes a fucking nightmare. The developers made every attack stun Jill in Nightmare and Beyond, so you basically have to be perfect with your dodges, one mistake and you are dead. That makes the fight so annoying, you have to be perfect. You can mash the buttons to recover from the stun faster, but still, that just allows you another chance to dodge the next hit. It's still infuriating. And this boss fight is the reason why I don't usually replay the game on Nightmare or Inferno mode. After destroying Nemesis one final time, Jill finally escapes the city on Chopper and leaves Nikolai to his fate. Did he die? We don't know. It's left ambiguous, just like in the original game. In the original game, the game had two endings, one where he dies and one where he survives. And we didn't know what ending was canon, so yeah, we still don't know if Nikolai is still alive. And before anyone says it, no, I don't care that Barry did not save Jill in the remake. It made no sense in the original anyway. How did Barry know where Jill was? Yeah, I don't care, it's not that important. And this is the end of the game. And it's time for the answer, I guess. Is this game good? The reason why I made this video in the first place is because everyone is treating this game like it's complete shit. They treat this game like it's big rigs, over-the-road racing or something. And no, that is just not true. Yes, this game is really good. The game is more action, more linear than the original game. It feels like Resident Evil 3 remade in Resident Evil 4 style. The gameplay is fun as fuck, the pacing is great, the story is a bit better than the original in my opinion, and the graphics are just awesome. This game received such a mixed reaction because it's so different from the original. It's not the same RE3 that you remember. The original had a stronger emphasis on puzzles, survival, slower pacing, and also a scarier nemesis. The action was worse, the dodge was worse, and some of the boss fights are better in the remake, in my opinion. That's why I suggest playing both the original and the remake. They are both good games, and they both offer something that the other game can't. Unfortunately, Resident Evil 3 Remake does not have much content besides its main campaign. There's no mercenaries, no epilogues, no RNG, no extra endings, but, surprisingly, it's still really fun to replay though. You have a shop where you can buy some pretty awesome weapons, like the Raiden, 3 costumes for Jill, one of which is pre-order, one hairstyle for Carlos, which is pre-order, attack, defense and recovery coins to customize your playthrough experience, and other cool stuff like the dodge manual and the reloading tool. These unlockables make replaying the game lots of fun, and also Nightmare and Inferno difficulties change the game just enough to make a second playthrough feel fresh. Also, even though everyone is saying that Resident Evil Resistance is shit, it's actually incredibly fun. If you have Resident Evil 3, try to give a try to Resident Evil Resistance. It's a really fun online game, even though it's really unbalanced at the moment. My final score for the game is an 8 out of 10. If this game had the mercenaries, the clock tower, and some extra features like the RNG, the live selections, and a lot of other stuff that they cut, it would have been easily a 9.5 out of 10. Unfortunately, I can't excuse all the missing content, so I basically had to drop my score. So it's unfortunate. The original RE3 is still a bit better in my opinion. I'd say that the original RE3 is a 9 out of 10, but this remake is not that bad. So give it a try. Maybe, just maybe, if we are lucky, when Capcom releases this game again on PS5, they will add some extra content, just like they did for the PS2 version of Resident Evil 4 back in the day. But that's just a really nice dream right now. Hopefully this review will make people stop talk shit about the game, but I doubt it. And thank you guys for watching. This was really hard to edit. Reminds me of when I was editing Let's Teach Phil How to Play videos. If you guys like, I can do more videos like these, but only if you guys want it, because it's really hard to make these. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys next time. Please remember to subscribe, comment and rate this video, so I will feel like my effort was worth it. So, I will see you guys next time. Enjoy this amazing song from the soundtrack of Resident Evil 3 Remake.